Okay. I'm going to call this meeting of the Value Engineering Subcommittee of the East Gloucester Veterans Memorial Building Committee to order. We are meeting by Zoom. This meeting will be recorded. It'll be made available. There'll be no opportunities for people to participate for the public, but this meeting will be held in public and for people to watch. That's probably close enough. We're not violating any open meeting laws by doing it this way. Okay. And I'm going to hand it off. We're meeting tonight to consider prioritization of different items for which we will have to enter into our budget to reduce the budget by a certain amount of money, which will all be explained as we go along. So I'm going to hand it over to Brad Dorr from Dorr & Whittier, who will walk us through all the options.
Okay. So hope everybody is doing all right after that wonderfully wet, long weekend we all had. So today what we want to do is, as we discussed at the last building committee level, is to be able to present to everybody the value engineering review that was done by the project team. And just by way of background, kind of the process, right, dictates in normal course that we go through and develop a series of potential VE options to the extent that, right, we're over what our original target budget was that we set at schematic design and ultimately was the basis for the city vote. And so more recently when we did that the last time out, right, at the design development stage, we were pretty much right on it, maybe even a little bit under it, which was good. And, you know, we went through and now we're at the 60% construction document level. So that the design has now advanced, right? We've had a couple of months distance between our last estimate and today. And as most everyone is aware, right, we're in a very volatile market right now with respect to materials pricing. And, you know, we anticipated that this was going to happen. And as of the time when we reconciled the estimate between our independent estimator and W.T. Rich's in-house estimating team, it turns out, right, that our current estimate at 60% construction documents is just a shade under $2 million, okay, in terms of that's what we're over as compared to our target budget. And I would encourage my fellow project team members out there, W.T. Rich and, you know, CBRE Heary, if all of a sudden I'm saying something that seems to have wandered off the path here, please jump in and save me, but just let me know. So what we've done is we took the two estimates that were originally prepared and stacked those up side by side. And our estimator was probably closer to the target budget. W.T. Rich's estimating team was a little further away from the target budget. We all got together, spent a solid day going through every line item, of which there are hundreds, if not like over 1,000 items. You know, Tim can testify to that, but ultimately went through and came to a reconciled estimate. That doesn't mean that every number is completely locked and loaded the same, but it means that, you know, everybody's had a chance to go review each item, and, you know, if there's some differences of opinions on things, try and work those out, and ultimately we get it close to within about 1% of the value between the two budgets, which we did. And then what we've done is we've taken a number of items where we saw potential savings opportunities and prioritized those 1 through 5. One being projects team recommendation as being one of the best kind of grouping to take. And then 5 basically saying we're not recommending it, even though it was brought up as a potential VE item. And we also just want to point out, this is an important piece, is that, right, of the items that we've recommended, which are essentially categories 1 and 2, right? That those items can all be taken and not impact, okay, the educational program. And you'll start to understand that a little bit better when we go through the list. What else do I have here on my list? Talked about, right, cost overruns primarily being driven by current market conditions. We have another estimate to go at 90%, which is a little ways out. And there's the possibility that some of these market-driven overages may have rectified themselves. We don't know if that's going to happen or not. So we're positioning ourselves as best as we can to, if there's an alternate opportunity to carry that as an alternate and get into what that means later. But of the approximate $2 million worth of VE that we're recommending, or the overage that we're trying to cover off, about $1.5 million of that was driven just by steel. Right? Does that sound right, John and Tim? That was my recollection of it, right? So, primarily, driven by market. There were a couple of things there that came in after the design development things that were design driven, primarily associated with the landscape design. Some of those opportunities, as we go through them, right, are relatively easy alternates, and again, don't affect the educational program. So that's the kind of high level backdrop to what the basis was, and we're going to go through the VE list here in a minute. So I'll stop for a second. And does anybody have any questions about process and why we are here today doing what we're doing? Okay. All right. Well, then what I will try and do now is share my screen. Okay, so everybody should be looking at what looks to be like an Excel spreadsheet that says on the bottom, it says VE grand summary and then VE summary 60%. Is everybody looking at that document?
Yes.
Okay, good. So this
Brad, can you zoom in until I say uncle? All right. Yeah.
That would work really well for me.
Wait, hit it one more time. Just let's see what happens. Yeah, that's good. Great. Thank you very much.
Okay. So as you can see here, let me just get rid of all your pretty faces, then I can see the whole document. Okay. All right. This is these columns basically represent the value associated with all of the VE. So the original cost estimate, right? And then you can go and see how we would be taking out VE. If you move to the right in the columns, right, we start adding, the different categories, therefore getting, more and more out of the job and more savings. And if you look at column 2, except 1 and 2, right, this gets us to where we are about $20,000 under our budget. So it would have been, if we get all of these in there and everybody's accept them, that's a success. Nobody likes value engineering, but right now, given the market uncertainties, this is what we're forced into. Any questions on this page? Okay, gonna move it right along then. So now we're actually getting into the actual VE items. And my plan is to be able to kind of go through these line by line. You can see over on column I, right? That's the value that's associated with these. I'll try and give you a fairly brief description of what these are and the basis for doing it. And I'll ask at the end of that, any questions? Give everybody a couple of seconds. There's a fairly significant list here, and then I'm going to try and rifle right through these. And if anybody has any questions at the end, obviously we'll pick these up. Okay. So the first one, right, which would be Excel line 11, item C01, which is replace granite seat wall, precast seat walls. That was something that was considered. These are at the kind of at the front entryway in the landscaped area. We characterize that as a 5, right, least preferred. The reason for not taking that on the job on that category is because we thought that the next item C01A was preferable, right, was to, at this point in time, take them right out of the job, take the full savings with that, carry those as an alternate later. So to the extent that, once we go out and bid the project and we see those, that would be an easy alternate, both to complete now and as well as looking forward, being able to accept that into the job. So for that particular item, right, there's almost $40,000 associated with that. Project team recommended C01A. Any questions on that particular item? Hearing none, I'll move on to the next item, C02, which is replace the specified promenade plank pavers with unilock pavers. Okay, this is essentially the surface at the front area. And for us, that was a pretty simple one because the ones that we had specified were unilock pavers, and we'll just go to a different flavor there. So the intent will be the same. It might be a little bit of a different design aesthetic, but design team is confident that we can make that work. Any questions on C02?
Does that change the durability?
No.
Okay.
It does not. So that was our recommendation there, right? And that was in lieu of C02A, C02B. All right. So we would not be accepting those if we took C02. The reason that we were looking to do that is ultimately we have kind of a better maintenance in the first year, okay, with concrete pavers than we do with green concrete. Both can be made to work, but we felt that this was from a long-term maintenance standpoint preferable, hence why we took that level of savings. So no, if there's nothing on the C02 series, I'll move on to C03. Okay, the next item that we had there was replace unit paver, C03, reduce 25% of the athletic service, okay, on bituminous paving. And so we felt that that was something that we could carve back a little bit, carried that as a 1. This is primarily in the area behind the building. And that would be a design to budget type thing where the design team would look at nipping and tucking around the edges of that to the extent without, dramatically impacting that. And with that, we see just under $20,000 worth of savings. And with that, okay, we would be not taking item C03A. Right, and just so you know, this is just for the surfacing on top of that. Right,
So what would
it's not actually reducing the entire area. It's just like, it's almost like tennis court surfacing, right? That would go in there, and we're just talking about reducing the amount of surfacing. That's correct, right, Tim?
Yes, Brad, sorry.
Yeah, no
what
problem.
would be there in its place? Is
It
concrete?
just-
Is it grass? Is it?
No, it would still be pavement, Amy.
Okay.
Right? It just wouldn't have, in some of those areas, we'd just be reducing, we'd be like, if you had a 4 square area or something like that,
Yep.
we'd be trying to, make it more tightly scheduled to the actual area that the 4 square area is going to be, rather than kind of a blast over an entire area, if you can follow
Okay.
that.
Yep.
Okay. So the next item would be moving on to the C04 series, right, which is replace the synthetic turf with grass for savings of almost 142,000. Project team recommended against that. And the reason that we did that was just because of maintenance, right? That's going to be a heavily utilized area out there, and we just don't think that if we put grass in there that it would stand up over the long haul. So we said we wouldn't recommend that, right? And then also in the areas where we were talking about the kind of rubberized surface, right? Similarly, taking that out and replacing that with grass, and we recommended not taking that as a potential option as well. So neither of the C4 series are recommended, right? And not included in the target level that we've achieved with only items 1 and 2. Any questions on C04? Okay, moving on to C05, utilize Western cedar in lieu of raised planters. In the raised planters, I think we have like a dozen or more of those, really just changing the wood type. Ipe, right, is pretty bulletproof stuff. Cedar, maybe not quite as bulletproof, but pretty bulletproof. Still very, reasonably high end and would be a good solid performer over the long haul, similar to what we used at West Parish. So we recommended taking those savings for just a little over $28,000. Any questions on C05? Moving on to C06. Okay, this is a design to budget target of reducing landscape plantings by 20% for savings of about $83,000. How this works is we would go and work with the landscape designer to go and look at his overall plantings budget and take 20% out of that. We don't know what that is, whether we're taking out tree X or tree Y, but what we would be doing is reducing the overall scope of the landscape plantings by 20%, again, for savings of about $83,000. And again, this is something, right, to the extent that we find ourselves, like most of these, in a situation where, we could set these up as alternates, and to the extent we had money on bid day, we could buy some of these things back. Any questions on the reduced planting budget? Okay, so I'm going to move on next to change decorative stone surface to decorative gravel. We have a number of areas, okay, in the landscape, hardscape areas that have what we call decorative stone, right? Okay, and those are larger size stones that would be in there. An example of that, looking at, for those of you maybe familiar with West Parish, some of the retention areas, right, have that large stone in there. And this would be changing the aggregate side to something that's smaller than that. And I think the size there is 3 to 6 inches versus like 6 to 12 inches. And we're able to go and get approximately $41,000 associated with that change. Any questions with respect to C07? Okay. The next one, all right, C08 is delete landscape boulders. Landscape boulders, along with the granite seat walls that we were talking about earlier, kind of located in the front terrace area primarily. There's seating areas, kids can, climb on them. They're nice, just like the seat walls are nice. They also lend themselves to a potential alternate down the road, but we're saying take those out right now and take those out of the job. And if we can put them back in later, or if we can find an economical way to get some of the boulders that are on the job that we may find, we may be able to work something out with the civil contractor or the landscape contractor to do that more simply or more cost effectively. Just remember though, every time we start touching these things, there's a cost associated with that. So the extent that we were to reutilize on-site boulders, that's not for free. So right now we're just saying we can save approximately $52,000 by taking that scope out of the job. Any questions on C08?
Brad, those are the decorative boulders, not the bollards that are in the next one, correct?
Yeah, the landscape boulders that we're talking about here are decorative.
Yeah, I just want to point out that there's no safety change in that.
No safety change here.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so C09, right, where we replace the specified stainless steel bollards with less expensive metal bollards, just changing the type there. Stainless steel is pretty bulletproof again. It's why we like to have it when we can get it and we can afford it. We have had a discussion, right, with the landscape architect who specified those, right? So that note where it says review building security on the side, right? His opinion is there's no change in terms of the security. We would be replacing just the type of bollard. So we'd be keeping the bollards as is, the same number, same spacing, et cetera, changing out the materials. Any questions on C09? Okay. C10, right? replace specified steel bench with do more benches, right? This was not recommended because we thought that there was C10A, right, which is to delete the 6 benches and relocate some of the buddy benches that you currently have and take the savings for $38,000. Again, right, potential alternate somewhere down the road if we in fact have money in the job. Any questions on the C10 series?
Could we just go back to the C9 for a second? I didn't hit my speak button. How much of a maintenance problem will be the painted, I assume, steel bollards down the road?
Yeah, I would expect these actually to be galvanized is what I suspect we would end up being. I don't know, Tim, what you priced, right, in the comparison, right? But, you know, galvanized hangs in there pretty well, right? Sometime down the road, you probably have to touch that up with Tanemic, right? A Tanemic zinc-based paint. Or, right, having to paint those, right? It's not going to be stainless steel. There is maintenance associated with it. You know, Joe Lucido, I know, is on the call. He can weigh in on that as well. You know, pretty common that we would see something that would not be stainless.
Okay. That answers my question.
Okay. Any further questions on C10 series? Okay. So moving on to C11, right? Eliminate bollards at playground, utilize steel gate to restrict traffic. That was taking out all of the bollards that we have, right? That separate the interior of the kind of circle, if you will, right? From the vehicle access, and essentially relying on the gates to perform the security function there. And we didn't think that that was a good idea just because, right, you can never for like 100% sure know that like the gates are going to be in the closed position when there's no kids there, and bollards, right, which separate the traffic from the play area kind of is the fail safe. So that's why the project team recommended against that particular item, as well as, right, C11A, right? We felt again, right, that the bollards were, you know, a stronger safety measure than either obviously taking them out or even, you know, putting the boulders in there. Any further questions on C11 series? Okay. C12, okay, it was recommended by the project team. Okay, we had a very nice gate, decorative gate, and to change that into something that's, you know, much simpler, right? So it would be like a chain link type gate rather than, you know, kind of a custom metal gate. And that would save us approximately $35,000. Right. And that gate actually was on the front entrance to, you know, the bus loop area. We looked and contemplated maybe even taking that gate out. But again, in the interest of keeping cars out of that area, there is a play area in there. And, you know, rather than have cars going in and then having to turn around, we thought that it was better to keep that in the job. Any questions on C12? Okay. C13, delete 2 gates, swing leaf gate, and the chain link fence above it. Okay, the savings there, $19,000. We thought about that. We thought about maybe removing 1 gate there. You know, again, you know, we're really trying hard to keep, you know, the vehicles and, you know, out of that back area when we don't want them in that back area. We thought that we could still probably accomplish that maybe and just take out 1 gate, but when you took out 1 gate, there really wasn't that much savings associated with it. So if we characterize that as a 3, if we needed to go back to that one, we could look at that and maybe get 1 gate out of it, but not a whole heck of a lot of savings associated with that item. So in terms of, you know, accepting 1s and 2s to meet our current target, that didn't fall into the mix. Any questions on C13? Okay, moving on to C14. Okay, change the turf edge, 160 linear feet of 12 inches it was 18 inches wide, changing that to 12 inches wide. That's something we worked through with the landscape architect. And this is the area, right, that provides an edge for the artificial turf field area. And we were able to reduce that without any issues. So for us, that was an easy one. Any questions on C14? C15, delete trash receptacles. You know, we had a number of trash cans that were scheduled onto the job. And if you look at it, there's about $20,000+ of savings, which is hard to imagine that you say it could actually be that much for trash cans. But every job we go through, we have the same answer, the same question comes up, and many times we see these VE'd out of the project. They're easy to replace sometime later. You know, if it's outside of kind of public procurement per se, because of just the way it works, sometimes those can be picked up more cost effectively. We're recommending the change at this time for approximately $21,000. Any questions with C15? Moving on to C16, right? We have along the back northern boundary, along the 128 edge, right? There currently are 2 fences in there. One I believe is the state's, one I believe is the city's. The city's one is in fairly tough shape right now. Our plan was to go and replace that with an 8-foot high fence. And we've talked about changing that to a 6-foot high fence instead of the 8-foot, for savings of approximately $11,000. And I believe consistent with the current fences that are in there at 6 feet. Any questions on C16? Okay. So I'm going to move right now by C17 through C20, moving on to structural. The first one here, right, was to change the steel tubes and plates where possible to a different type of steel column shape. We did review this with the structural engineer, and ultimately found, right, even with respect to, you know, the level of savings that are here, that we did not think that it would be realized. We thought also that there was going to be a fairly significant design effort that was going to take place, and, you know, we're not worried about the effort. We are concerned about the time that it would take to do that, and the ripple effect that that would have everywhere else. So given the kind of post-estimate review by the structural engineer and, you know, anticipated level of savings, this didn't fall into kind of our recommended list, our 1s and 2s, if you will. If we didn't get there today, right, the next place we would go to 3s, and we'd evaluate that type of change further to see what level of savings ultimately might materialize. Any questions on S01? All right, the second one, S02, is replace all the wood glue lamps with steel beams. Well, this one is a fairly significant design aesthetic, but even beyond the design aesthetic, we just did not believe that we were going to get that level of savings out of it. And so it was not recommended as an item at this time. Any questions on S02? Okay, moving on to S03, change rigid inclusions to aggregate piers, savings of $210,000. We originally had rigid inclusions, wraps or rammed aggregate piers in the job, and they were switched over by the geotechnical engineer to the rigid concrete inclusions. So we actually don't believe that that really is a viable option at this time. We may be able to reduce some of them on the outside of where we actually need some of that for structural support, as well as some of the support in the heavy traffic pavement areas. So it's something that we left on there as a 3, that if we had to go back and look at some of that, there might be some savings associated with that, but not recommended at this time. Any questions on S03? Moving on to S04, radon mitigation is to take this out of the scope, right, for potential savings of $26,700, right? Essentially, with radon, you never really know until you get into the building and it shows itself, right? We don't have a basement here, and we are going to have, right, a vapor barrier underneath the slab. But, you know, the risk of, you know, potentially having that vapor barrier get punctured and work its way through the slab somehow, right? And then it's much harder to deal with it after the fact as compared to putting in, you know, some prevention opportunity today for a relatively low amount. We thought it would be wise to go and continue to carry that at this point in time, right? For $26,700, it's an insurance policy, essentially. Any questions about S04? Okay, so S05 is utilize crushed concrete in lieu of structural fill where we can. The takeoff on that is approximately 2,300 yards. We typically would do this. We see it as a VE opportunity on most jobs. It's good because it's recycled. There's no structural, you know, problems with it. We've run it by the geotechnical engineer who's responsible for soils condition and developing the background for the foundation design. He's green lighted it, so we recommend that as a potential savings opportunity for about $62,005. Any questions on S05? Okay, so we'll move down into the A series now. Okay, simplify the metal roof edge details. Okay, so from the last time that we did that, we actually went and fairly significantly from the design development estimate, cut those back to make those not as deep and not as high, depending on which way you're looking at it. So we already had some savings there. We felt that, right, the changing that would materially change the aesthetic. You know, I think the number here was to have a very thin strip of brake metal along, correct me if I go off base here, Tim, right? But, you know, something that would be along the top edge of the roof, and it would just be essentially brake metal and a gravel stop. So, you know, we just don't think that that would fit in with the building as currently contemplated. We didn't completely rule it out, but we again carried it as a 3 rather than a 2. So if we didn't get there, it would be in the category that we'd go back and take another look at. Any questions on A01? Okay, A02. Looks like that was a thought, but never really kind of panned out, so there's nothing there. A03, utilize calcium silicate stone in lieu of granite base. Okay, so there are a lot of different types of kind of, you know, man-made stone, if you will, that will look very close to granite. It won't be real stone, but will look just like stone, and from a durability standpoint will be just fine. So that was one that we recommended taking savings of $43,300 with. Any questions on A03? Okay, moving on to A04. This is essentially eliminate metal wall. X1, X22 is not going to help you guys achieve look with other masonry material. So there's a couple areas, as you remember, where we have metal panels in the building. Obviously in the entranceway, that's a metal panel feature. And then there's a couple others on the front academic wing and on the back side of the academic wing that are all metal panels. And we were talking about, you know, either moving that over to, you know, masonry or something else. The something else, my experience has been, you never can get it down to $55 a square foot. And if you get in there, the metal panel piece of that just it doesn't look very good. You could get there with brick at that price level, but we just felt again, right, that the metal panel kind of helps break up the building, right? And we felt that it's an important aesthetic feature to the building. So we recommended against taking that for $61,500. And we were able to find different ways to get to our target. Any questions with A04? A5 is a nice easy one for me since it's not used. Investigate A06, investigate soffit materials. Okay. And here, target 10 square foot, $10 a square foot savings. Just didn't think at this point in time we were actually going to see all of that really materialize. Kept it in the potential if we're not able to get there, but would not recommend taking it at this time. So that's on the underside of the soffits. And I'm assuming that, if I remember correctly, also underside of the canopy area. Any questions with that particular item? Okay, so moving on to A07, change current brick to a larger brick for $110,000. This is one that we actually did recommend taking. It wouldn't be our number one choice, but we're trying to save money here. So for $110,000, we would be essentially increasing the size of those bricks, trying to maintain the same kind of color and texture, field relationship, and we'd be able to go and save $110,000 by doing that. We see this an awful lot. The savings really becomes because the mason's able to lay it up faster because the bricks are larger, but not so large as, right, it slows them down when they're actually laying up. So we thought that this was worthy of discussion, and we included it in our VE list.
How much larger would the bricks be?
Well, if I had to guess, I would say they might be like around a third larger. We haven't actually got into, kind of figuring out exactly what brick type that would be. Typically, we like to have the same relationship, kind of the width height relationship, rather than getting to something that's boxier. So we really have to go out there and investigate, what's available from the different brick manufacturers. But I think it's safe to say, like, a third larger is probably a pretty reasonable assumption.
So you're saying a brick that's currently 9 inches long would be 12 inches long?
Yeah, something along those lines, and a little fatter.
Yeah.
Right. We have to go back and recourse the building to, figure out how that all works and understand what all of those details would be. But, if we came back and we found that that was something that just wasn't going to work, well, we'd report back to you, but we're optimistic on that. Obviously we'd be showing it to you at some point in the future. We have, like I said, we have another check-in on the design estimates at 90%. And if that was good idea at 60%, but don't like it now, well, then we'd have to go back and revisit it. Any additional questions on A07? Hearing none, I'll move on to A08, delete mock-up and utilize in-place mock-ups. So when we can, we really like to have mock-ups that are done, kind of field placed and not necessarily on the job. Gives us a chance to do all of those, very early on. Whereas, putting them on in the field, it's kind of dictated by, how the construction progress goes. But it happens an awful lot. They are expensive. We won't see any degradation here, and we'll still be able to do all of our testing. So we recommended going and taking the savings there at $32,000. Any questions on A08?
So my recollection is that's what we did at West Parish, that the mock-ups were on site.
Your memory may be better than mine, but I think that you're right, Jonathan, on that. And I think
Both shaking her head.
yeah, I think you're right about that.
So there's no difference from what we did at West Parish.
Yeah. And we do it very often.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I may have misunderstood what, we did have a mock-up on site at West Parish. But we did do window testing on the building.
That's correct. That's what it was. Again, though, I think that while we may not have done it this exact same way on West Parish, right? We weren't facing the same things we're facing today. So there's no degradation to the building or the testing. So we recommend taking it.
Good.
Okay, I'm gonna move on to A09, some of the other metal things, topics we talked about here. Changing those out, the actual MCM panels for corrugated metal. We just don't think you would be happy with that. So we recommend against that savings there. And again, we're able to meet our target. Any questions on A09? Okay, replace precast lintels with steel lintels, basically a loose lintel. So we had a discussion, during the design of this, and there's not a whole heck of a lot of savings here, and there seemed to be a fairly strong desire to have those precast lintels on this building. The precast lintels on this building. So we carried that as a 3. If we need to come back to it, we can, but not a lot of savings there. And again, some of the stuff we never talked about, we actually did talk about precast lintels, and you wanted to have them, so we kept them in the mix, and we're still able to meet our target. Any questions on A10? Okay. Going to move on to the interior part of the architectural scope on A20. Delete ground face CMU at the stairwells 1 through 3 and keep CMU painted with epoxy. Different aesthetic, still very durable. Obviously, we're going to have concrete block with an epoxy paint. So we think that that's, very good. Changes a little bit of some of the aesthetic in terms of how it relates to the rest of some of the ground face that we have in the buildings, but because the stairways are partitioned off and kind of their own element, we recommended taking that level of savings for over $40,000. Any questions on A20? Okay. A21, this is a window type change. We didn't recommend it at this time. Essentially, it's the kind of the round windows that you've seen. There's a few of those on the building, and changing those out with kind of a square window. There wasn't a whole heck of a lot of savings associated with that. I think it's kind of goes with the elementary school theme. It's a little bit fun. We're able to achieve our target. We kept it as a 3. Again, if we don't hit it today, or we have to go back and look at something later, this would be on the list for the next round if necessary. Any questions on A21? Okay, on A22, delete folding partitions. This is something that I would argue, right, would impact the educational program. If not directly, indirectly. We didn't recommend taking it. These folding partition are between some of the classrooms, allow, large group environment. We did not think that that was something that, the educators would be receiving very well. So we opted out of any recommended there and carried that as a 5. Any questions about A22?
I think Brad, can you hear me?
Yep.
So I think this is a good example of one of the items here that would really, if changed, would really impact our educational plan and our, our educational program, and how, teachers, students, different classes are interacting. So really, I think that's a good choice to prioritize that as a 5, and keep it safe from any value engineering. So I think it's a very, very good choice, and it's a good example of how we're staying away from impacting the educational program. So thanks.
Agreed. Any additional comments on 822? Okay, I'm gonna move on to A23, right? These are some millwork type items, right? Where and I'm gonna hit A24 here as well. And so these are expensive items, right? There's a lot of work involved in putting these together. And some of these are more easily adaptable to being able to pick up as FF&E items. Both of these, were proposed as, take them out of, architectural millwork and put them into FF&E. Many times, right, we would see these in jobs as FF&E type items to the extent that they can be handled that way. We felt that with respect to A23, based on the current design, it would be hard to go and replace those, throughout the entire building. So we actually carried that as a 3 because the value still is pretty high, but we were able to meet our target without having to dip into that. And then looking at, the window seats, throughout the building is, those would be easier, right, to be able to replace through an FF&E pickup. There's a significant value there, and we still would carry this as an alternate that we would look at, probably pretty high on your priority list, if we found that we had money at the end of the job.
Brad, so is the difference, the benches that like in the front entrance under the stairway would still be there, or the ones by the learning commons would still be there, but the window seats are the one in the classroom?
That's correct. And right, so basically it's almost like a public-private distinction.
Yep.
And so the ones that would be in the public spaces, those would remain in the job at this point, okay, as millwork. And then the benches, right, window seats would be picked up under the FF&E budget, right? And we feel that, right, the FF&E budget, right, you guys made the vote, right, to increase that, I believe, to $1,700, right, from $1,200. So, I'm not saying that that's luxurious, but we have a little room for wiggle there. So we carry it as an option, right? We carried it as a 2. So this would be in the VE savings recommendation that we're currently considering.
So just explain to me, if we carry it as an alternate, and we can pay for it out of FF&E, and it'd still be millwork. It wouldn't be just a bench that somebody carried in.
So what we would do is we would devise an alternate, right, that would essentially keep this as currently contemplated.
Mm-hmm.
And then just like all alternates, right, when we go out and, we bid the job, we'll have however many alternates. And those all need to be prioritized by the building committee. And, this one here, right, depending, might be high on your list to go and keep in the job, depending upon, where the bids come in on bid day. And, if they're accepted, then you don't touch your FF&E budget at all. If they're not accepted as an alternate, right, then you would hit your FF&E budget, right, to be able to purchase those with something in lieu of the millwork that was in the job.
Okay, so it wouldn't be, if we buy it out of FF&E, it would not be the same as what we are going to put out for bid. But the so when we get the alternates back, it'll be up to the building committee to look at those prices and decide if there should be money available to pick and choose some of them. We'd be able to do that.
That's correct.
Yeah. Good, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions on 823, 824? Okay. 825, tile type 2 in our drawings and specifications, right? In tile 1, there's a pretty material difference in the tile types, unbeknownst to our interior designer. And I don't know if that's a market condition or what that is, but we're going to change that tile. We change that tile regardless, now that we know the cost associated with that. So we would recommend that. So it's just going to be a different tile. No degradation in quality. It would just be, a different tile. And I don't know what drives it, whether it's like a line of tile, a color of tile, but we're going to make the change and we'll be back and make sure everybody's on board with what the new product is. But that one was a pretty easy one for us, given the level of savings. Any questions on A25? Okay. The next one was to go and change. Actually, Michelle, you know what? You're in the best position. This one has always evaded me a little bit. I wouldn't be very eloquent, so you can do this one a lot faster than I can. Maybe.
Sorry, we're talking about the flooring,
Yeah,
So-
826 MCT
Yeah.
with patterns.
yeah, so when we first laid out the flooring, we had changed the sheet goods to a tile product because we thought it would be less money then. And then we started developing different patterns for the flooring. And then once we did that, the tile became more expensive because of all the cutting that we had to do. So we want to go back to a different tile or the sheet goods. So, or looking closer at the patterns.
Where is this flooring? In the hallways?
So
or
this is in the academic hallways.
So that wave would no longer be there?
If we go to a sheet good, it would still be there. Yes.
And
So it's
that's, I'm sorry, this is A20.
A26. Yep.
Yeah, we're not recommending we take this at this point in time.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so, but I just wanted Michelle to go through it because she's just closer to this particular item than I am.
So we're taking a closer look at what those patterns are and what it will take to make them on the tiles.
Any further questions on A26? Okay, A27, delete exterior walk-off grates. So, right, this is on the exterior building. So it's what we have over at West Parish. We think, the more walk-off opportunities that you have, right, the better off you are, right? Get as much of the stuff off people's boots and shoes outside the building to the extent that you can. So, there's money there, at about $58,000. But we recommended or carried this as a 3. So, right, meeting our target at this time. We don't hit it today because of changes or something happens down the road at 90%. It's something that we bring up again for consideration. Any further questions on A27? Okay. A28 is basically kind of a design change associated with a particular ceiling tile. This tile that was specified was a little bit more expensive than anticipated. So we're going to back off that, make a design change, or recommend backing off that, make a design change for about $42,000. I would bet nobody would be the wiser if we didn't tell you about this now, if we made this change. Any further questions on A28?
No degradation of quality.
No, sir. Right. We'll still make sure that we, have all the sound ratings and, fire code and all that stuff that we need.
Great.
Okay. A29. This is kind of almost like an internal type change. We're not recommending it, so I'm just not going to dive into that one. A30 confirms same thing there, right? Nothing really there to talk about. A31, delete hardwood nosing from countertops. This is just an edging on the countertops. We think that the hardwood nosing is going to stand up better, right, than just having, that as a, call it Formica. It won't be Formica because that's a brand name, but you know what I'm saying, right? So that would just be like a hard edge there. We typically try and stay away from that as a design for countertops. So not being presently considered. Any questions on A31? Okay. Move metal bookcases at the media center to FF&E for about $107,000. We're not completely sure why that's ended on the job. Typically, we would carry metal bookcases as an FF&E item. So I think that this is just kind of almost like shouldn't have been there in the first place. So propose moving that over to FF&E, carried that as a 2. Any questions on that? Okay. A33 is change the wood gym flooring to a resilient athletic floor for $27,600. So we feel wood floors in gymnasiums are a much better product than a resilient floor. Just for, kind of what's called a DIN rating, right? So if you're playing basketball, right, it's much more of basketball feeling versus like playing basketball on concrete, as well as just all other types of, PE and, athletic experiences that you would have in a gym. So we would not recommend making that change. Any other questions with A33? Okay. Moving on to A34, replace the wood ceiling. Okay, I believe this is primarily on the second floor and in the media center, changing that wood ceiling to ACT. Again, tying that back to the design aesthetic, which is a very significant part of the building in the public spaces, right? And ties back to the whole wood glue lamb experience. We would recommend against looking at that at this time, and we're still able to meet our budget opportunity, our budget target. Any other questions associated with A34? Okay. A35 is change out the interior stair walls to a gypsum wallboard framed, with some type of wainscot. We recommend against this just due to maintenance reasons, right? Right now, as we talked about, in some of those stair walls, we'd be changing those from ground face block to CMU with epoxy paint. This would take that further. We just think from a maintenance perspective, it's a less preferred long-term option. Any questions associated with A35? Okay. A36 is eliminate curb library shelving units. This one we had quite a bit of discussion about. We felt that the design team was fighting hard for this one from the interior aesthetic perspective, is to carry that as a 3 so that if we had to go back to it, it would be on the list for further discussion. But we were able to successfully meet our target at this point in time, so we carried it as a 3 and not a 1 or a 2. Any questions on A36? Okay, moving on to A37, delete any stage equipment that we had. There's not a lot of stage equipment currently in the job. I mean, it is an elementary school, so you wouldn't expect to have as much. But we think it's appropriate that you would have, some limited, type of, kind of stage performance, type equipment in there. Again, this is, kind of tied back to educational program. So we shied away from that and are not recommending A37 to delete the stage equipment at this time. Any questions on A37?
Could that be shifted to FF&E?
It could, and I think that it all could. I'd have to go back. We'd have to go back and do a little bit more detailed review of what some of those things are, but I think probably the majority of the cost could be. And, if we get to that point where, next time, if we find ourselves at 90%, this would come up again. Right now, We just didn't have it as like a 3 or 4 because it kind of danced on the educational piece of it. So we kept it out. But it's something that, we make a note and say, if we're there again later in the job, maybe we do consider it as an FF&E item.
Thank you.
Any other questions on A37? Okay, A38, replace pocket doors with regular swing doors and hardware. These are in the kind of in the small group rooms. We actually like this change. And, it's something that may have in normal, kind of design evolution evolved that way, but with the pressure, I'm not sure exactly who nominated this one, but we would prefer from a maintenance perspective to have swing doors, and we looked at kind of without having to revise the geometry of those spaces. Still, I think that we can sneak those in with swing doors, avoid door conflicts, and make that a better long-term solution for you. So we would recommend that change.
I think those pocket doors were put in because there was a lack of wall space inside the small.
That's correct.
So how does that affect this?
So we think that we're able to be able to go and move some of those things around a little bit. We looked at the layout diagrams. Correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, but I think that we can do that without materially impacting the functionality of that space.
Amy, if you remember, we had to switch the swing of the doors for the building, the request of the building official. So when we changed the doors going into the classrooms, it actually provided more wall space in that space area for the pocket doors. So now we could change those into swing doors.
So in the small space, the door from the hallway swings in,
The door to the hallway swings out.
swings out. And what about from the classrooms?
And so the pocket, it allows more wall space in the small group rooms for those doors to swing out into the classroom.
Okay.
There's actually more wall space now because we had to change the swing of the classroom doors.
Okay, so there'll be no doors swinging into the small space.
No,
Okay. And to classroom doors, this is separate. Swing in or out? I forget.
they currently are swinging out into the corridor.
Okay.
Okay, any additional questions on A38? Okay, so moving on to mechanical. Looked at potential for ProPress fittings in, non kind of hidden areas, non-accessible areas. We'd already had that in the job, so I guess they had that good idea earlier on. Eliminate AC as M02. We recommended against this. There's a lot of discussion throughout, the early stages of the design, right? That basically, it was a highly sought after feature to be able to have AC, to be able to use the building during the summer as, you start to evolve in some of your educational potential changes over time, utilize the space more effectively, as well as, having that area for, public use, depending on what that use may be during the summer months. So we recommended against that at this time. Any questions on M02?
I just agree. I think it's really important that we keep this building air conditioned through the summer. My expectation is it's going to be used heavily.
The summer school will be there, I believe.
I would think so because of its location, and as well as the basketball, the gymnasium.
Yep, we agree. Okay, if there are no additional comments on M02, I'm going to move on to M03. This was to really looking at having localized hot water, at sinks. We actually, given the fact that, kindergarten spaces have their own, need for having, a sink in the room and the number of them on the job, We kind of questioned whether or not we would get overall this level of savings and whether in the long term, right, higher maintenance cost associated with that, whether that was worthwhile. So we carried that as a 4, not recommending taking that at this time. Any questions on M03? Okay, looks like we cleared the deck on the rest of the mechanical, so moving on to electrical. Going and moving on to E02, right? Switchboards and panel boards are all specified to have copper busing. Consider aluminum busing instead. This is kind of change in technology over time. That didn't used to be a favorable kind of value engineering topic. This is only on kind of the primary, not on the distribution system. So we see this as a fairly common value engineering option for almost $43,000. We did run it by our electrical engineers, and basically same for A03. And they both said that that would be fine to take. So we recommended them and included those for a little over $100,000 combined. Any questions on E02, E03? Okay. Moving on to E04, started getting into some more technical stuff associated with electrical, which is a little outside of my area of expertise. So the recommendation right now, the project team was not to take, E04, E05 didn't even materialize. So are there any questions on E04? Not recommending it at this time. Okay, I'll move on to E06, right? Simplify lighting controls to use line voltage devices for each space rather than digital control lighting system. I think this really takes a lot of the, functionality and being able to program and take, this on a fairly macro level and being able to modify things. I think it really changes kind of the nature of how the control system would work. So while it could be done, we're not recommending taking it at this time.
Brad, that's the sort of thing that might affect, that would affect rather energy consumption and then also sort of the LEED certification?
Certainly energy consumption. I don't know the specific answer. We haven't run that trap all the way down through the LEED kind of program yet, but basically then because we were able to get there without having to take it. But I think, Joe may be able to weigh in on this, having stuff, kind of all tied into, kind of your digital control system, I think is very valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt. I'd hate to see that go away.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Thanks, Brad.
Yep. E07, right? Taking the lighting fixture package. On this one, this would be a design to budget type thing. Not even really sure exactly what it would be. But if it came to a point that, again, we weren't able to meet budget, we'd really start to dive into that to see if we, start changing up fixtures. One thing I can say, it's very hard to get like real information out of lighting distributors. They just, they got a little bit, I guess it's a public club, I'll still say it, a little bit of a racket going there, and it's very hard to suss out, real individualized pricing. So we put this on the, if we have to do it list, we can go and take a look at it. And, but right now, we didn't dip into that one any further. Right. I'm going to say the same thing about E08, remove K-rated transformers. Being completely honest, I don't even know what that means. But, there wasn't that much savings associated with that. We were able to meet our target. If we need to come back to that, we'll make sure we have someone smarter than me being able to describe what that is. But at this point in time, we're really not having to go that far. The last one, right? The generator can arguably be removed if the client would accept battery backup for lighting. It seems to me, right, that, who knows exactly, how long an outage might be, what your use in an emergency situation might be. This is an all electric building. Where do we have all of these batteries, all of that consideration? So arguably there is a lot of money there. And, that would be something that, if we weren't able to meet our current target, I think we'd have to go and get a lot smarter on before it, wasn't included. But right now, again, we've met our target and don't have to go, down that path. So
Yeah.
right now, kind of the backup plan is to have a diesel generator, right, that would be able to go and step up for you if the system went down. Any other questions on E09?
I would just like to say that all of our schools can be used as emergency shelters, and I think you need to have a solid backup electrical system in an all electrical building. So I would hate to see this go.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Jonathan on that. It's not just lights. We're talking, information technology systems. You're talking, your heat. I mean, in the winter, a battery is not going to keep that building warm. Food service has food, freezers, refrigerators in house. So it's more than just lighting, without a doubt.
Right. And just in the interest of protecting my client here, Jonathan, I know what you're saying with respect to emergency shelters, but we did have that discussion at some point. This is not formally set up as an emergency shelter because some of the other considerations that would have to be taken place, but there's no doubt, right, that in an emergency situation, it would be, an area that, you could go to, but just to be clear, it's not designated as a shelter. Okay, so with that, if you look at all of the items that we have recommended as either ones or twos, we get to, and I'm going to go back to for just a moment to the grand summary, right? We have been able to achieve just a smidge under $2 million, which puts us currently at about $20,000 under budget as was originally set at schematic design. So if, right, the subcommittee were to accept these and make a recommendation to the full committee to accept these, we would then be on target, okay, to make our submission to MSBA, and we would start to go and prepare whatever design changes need to be prepared in order to facilitate this so that they would be included in the next submission. And then we would start to work on the alternates and how those would get laid out, anticipating that at least at some point in the future, these are going to have to be prioritized. And some of that may come sooner or later because some of these items may be earmarked as part of the early release packages that we have coming up, but it's not our intent today, right, to do any alternate prioritization. It's just to get consensus on what an agreed upon VE list would be to present to the entire building committee. So with that, I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen and we can go back to it if necessary. And turn it back over to you, Jonathan, just to have the rest of the discussion.
Okay, I just have a quick question to start this discussion about this. When do we review this again? How far down the road from now?
So the next check-in point in terms of estimate reconciliation is at the 90% set. So what do you have right now, Michelle or Mark, for the current reconciliation date for 90%? I don't have-
Michelle, I believe it's the end of August, early September. It's coming up. It's not all that far out.
Yeah,
No.
that's what I thought. I was just wondering if we when we get there, whether we can, what we might anticipate as far as what everybody sees in the market right now, because this is all market driven. It's not because, you design something that costs more than we thought it was going to cost. It's because prices have gone up considerably on product, not so much on labor. So I was just wondering if anybody had the crystal ball out and could tell us whether we're going to be hitting 3s and 4s in a couple of months or not.
And again, there is no crystal ball. And there are folks that will contend that it's reasonable that we're not going to sustain some or all of these high prices. The challenge is nobody can predict reasonably when that downturn may occur. So what we've done as a team, and the team did an awful lot of work and came up with an awful lot of items without impacting educational program to choose from. We've also done it in a way where if we do get some of that market improvement that we're hopeful for, then by utilizing a reasonable number of alternates, we can effectively buy back the highest priority items.
To the extent, right, that we have savings in the job on bid.
No, right, and right, that's the only way you get an alternate is if you've bid prices have come in sufficiently favorable, so you've got a positive delta between your budget and your current bids to accept alternates. We're also looking at items where the work is done later in the project to actually carry an estimated amount and then buy it out later without peril to the project to achieve some advantages, with a better market, a year from now, say.
So this is a good question, right? I'll give you my quick 2 cents, right? And then I think it'd be good to hear from WT Rich, but, right? So recently, right, for those of you who've made an excursion to Home Depot, right, you will have recognized sheet of plywood's a good example. I used to buy sheets of plywood for $40, right? I was in Home Depot last week, it's $92. And, that is still the current price at Home Depot, notwithstanding the fact, right, that the kind of lumber futures price has, plummeted, to use, right, some of the pundits' words out there, right? But it still hasn't hit, kind of the retail level or wholesale levels yet. So I personally don't believe we're going to see a huge level of savings between now and 90%. And what we're doing is being reasonably conservative with what we have, and then positioning ourselves the best that we can, to the extent that when the 100% set occurs, we go through the bidding process, right? And that's going to be out in October, right? That maybe some of the current volatility of market will have subsided, and we'll actually see some of that being reflected in real world pricing. But I don't think, Jonathan, right, that we'd probably see it in a month.
Okay.
That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I wasn't sort of thinking that we were going to see a change that was going to save us money. I just was wondering whether we were going to see a change that was going to bring us right back here and looking at more cuts in a couple of months. That's what I was.
Yeah, one thing, just to weigh in from WT Rich's perspective, I think Brad put it pretty good, that it's, and other people, Mark, as well. Like it would be kind of foolhardy to make any strong predictions of what's going to happen. It's very volatile right now. But one of the things I think we have going for us is that at the same time, we're pricing the estimate based on the 90% CDs. We're bidding the early package number 2, which is the steel and the concrete and some other things, the glulam, site work, et cetera. But the steel in particular, the steel is the big culprit in our overrun and contributing to our overrun. And that was based on subs giving us budget numbers, in part, what they're seeing today, but probably a little bit also of their nervousness about the market. And when it comes, that was a budget number, but when it comes to winning a job, we might, I think we're not going to see any further. I'd be surprised if we see a lot of escalation in the steel in the next month or two, because we've always taken that hit, with the caveat, of course, no one knows for sure. So I think but the good news is those prices will become known instead of estimated prices. And they form a pretty good size chunk of the job. I don't have the number in front of me, but probably, I don't know, 10 or 12 million at least, right? So it's a big chunk of the job that we're bidding out that value. And then at least we can lock it in, that we know, and that we don't have any more uncertainty about. And then we can kind of see the rest of the job bids 3 months later. But I mean, we could be in this position again, Jonathan. We're still carrying some escalation in our current estimate. I have talked to a few subs who said they weren't going to escalate any further because then they feel like they wouldn't win the job. They're just going to bid things on the current market price, maybe take a little risk there that the prices don't go up further, and maybe even get some benefit if they do in fact come down. But a couple of guys I talked to said they would not add another escalation factor to their bids. But again, a lot of speculation. There's nothing that's going to be going out to the market and getting actual bid prices from subs.
Right. Well, thank you. I'm just concerned that looking for a little bit of stability even at these high prices, and that's what I was hoping for. Is there any other questions that anybody would like to ask about different items before we make a motion? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to make a motion that we recommend to the full committee that we accept all of the items in categories 1 and 2 of the value engineering recommendations from the Dore and Whittier and CBRE Hearing and WT Rich, and that's it. That's the motion that we recommend that they vote for those. Yeah. There's 4 of us here, so somebody has to second that.
So I'll second that.
Okay, so is there any discussion?
Sure. I just want to say a couple of things. So first of all, I'll just reiterate, John, what you said was that, changes in design or just the design itself, changes in the design have not caused the increase in the estimates. Just the market conditions, these are pandemic related or pandemic driven, market changes in pricing. So obviously very little control over that. So that's an important piece. Just want to reiterate. But then also I really appreciate the work that our project team did in terms of our project team is doing the work that, we're asking them to do, that we pay them to do. And that's to work well together, OPM, designer, construction manager on, helping us make good decisions. So, and I really appreciate the work that the team put in to understand this, make sure the estimates were, consistent, both estimates, and then look closely at the different options and giving us a lot of options, and not only for right now, but also looking ahead, potential in case, we need to make further changes. And I think the other piece is just really appreciate that I think in terms of the decision we're making here, we're really staying away from an impact on the educational program, really staying away from any impacts on safety or security. And, the overall like design and function of the building isn't changing. There are some, disappointing changes to some of the exterior features and some of the design features. We get that, but also they're reasonable. They're spread out over a variety of a whole bunch of areas, to not hit any one area too severely. I think the last piece is we made some good choices on making sure that, maintenance and upkeep, are, we have materials that try to minimize upkeep and maintenance, because they will last long, they're easy to maintain, they keep the building, clean and reduce wear and tear. So it's a hard thing to try to meet all those things. But I think, with the project team's support and help and work, that at this point, anyway, we've been able to do a good job on that, which I'm really pleased about, just in terms of being the, in terms of speaking for the schools. So thanks to the team. And I think we're, it's never easy. It almost always has to be done. But I think we're doing pretty well so far on this.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'd just like to thank everybody. There's been a lot of work to put into this, and I'm very appreciative that we're still going to get a school that's going to deliver education in the way that we hope to do it in the future for the children of Gloucester. And this is still going to be a fabulous building, even with these cuts. And the good thing about a lot of this is these things can be put back. These can, when things change or turn around, a lot of them can be put back without a major problem. Some of them are going to be done, but I'm just appreciative of the hard work that everybody's put in to get us to this point and to get us back on budget, which is the important thing. And I'm certainly going to vote in favor of this. Is there any other discussion? Okay, well, I will call for a roll call vote, and I'll do it myself. I don't know if is anybody taking, Maria, you're here are you going to do minutes of this meeting?
I wasn't planning on it.
I didn't think so, but if I twist your arm, you could, right?
Yes, I could do it from the recording.
Okay, thank you. So the roll call vote, Amy Pascarello,
Yes.
Ben Lummis,
Yes.
Joe Lucido,
Yes.
and myself, and I vote yes. So it carries unanimously, and I'd like to thank everybody for their patience and all the hard work done. So we will meet on Thursday. This will be the recommendation of the full committee, and we'll keep moving forward.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Michelle, John, Jonathan. Really appreciate it.
Okay, do we have is there anything else we need to take up before we adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Do we have
It's-
a second? Okay, Amy Pascarello,
Yes.
Ben Lummis,
Yes.
Joe Lucido,
Yes.
and I will vote yes myself. So this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you all on Thursday.
Thursday. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.